It was named after the River Derwent in Cumbria by British Commodore John Hayes, who explored it in 1793. The name is Celtic and means valley thick with oaks, but the native trees here are she oaks. He named it River Derwent only for the upper part of the river. Matthew Flinders changed it to Derwent River for all of the river. Funnily enough, both names are still used today.
G'day and welcome to Forgotten Tasmania. I'm John Stevenson. My grandfather took the iconic photos of the bridges that hang in many homes around the state. But we'll get to those photos later, because right now I'd like to explore the other ways that people crossed the river before the bridges were even built.
The Muhunina people were crossing in canoes thousands of years before British settlement. I've seen models in the museum, and there are middens along the banks of the Derwent. The written record of Derwent River crossing starts in 1803 with the arrival of the colonists. The Reverend Knopwood's diary mentions several trips. We know that there was smuggling and even a military blockade of the Derwent River by Captain William Bligh. There was whaling and of course the regular arrival of ships bringing convicts, colonists, supplies and the occasional famous visitor such as Charles Darwin. Boats crossed at the narrower parts of the river. In the early days the boats were rowed or sailed. James Austen, a farmer from England, was transported to Van Diemen's Land for stealing a beehive. When he'd served his time, he was granted land at Roseneath and started to farm sheep. He added a ferry service across the Derwent and a hotel on either side of the river. You could eat and drink, spend the night and get across the river with up to 5 horse-drawn carriages or as many as 300 sheep in a single trip. The place is now called Austin's Ferry. Richard Burrows established the Black Snake Inn and a ferry service from Granton to Green Point, now called Bridgewater, although the Green Point name is being used again, the name Bridgewater having acquired a stain from a public housing project in the 1970s. The inn was a halfway stop on the way to New Norfolk, a road having been constructed in 1819, although Burrows was accused of blocking the road from time to time to increase business at his inn. There were other ferry services across the Derwent. Everything happened on the water. Martin Cash rowed across to rescue his wife from imprisonment. The Reverend Knopwood was shipped over to Clarence Plains to be buried. Funerals, trade, industry and even water and sewerage was taken across the river by boat. Photographer Mark Thompson told me he'd taken some photos from the old fertiliser factory at Shag Bay. I didn't know anything about this factory, so I asked Maria Grist, who sent me a paper she'd written about it, and I was able to get some history of that place. Turns out that it was in fact an early sewage treatment plant. Carts would collect the night soil from outside toilets in Hobart, and boats would take it across the river to be treated in a steam pressure machine that turned it into fertiliser, along with meat and bone scraps, dead animals and other organic waste. They sold the fertiliser. It was an early recycling effort that reminds me of Macquarie Point. Which is where the current sewage works is for Hobart, and also Garth's Point, which is where the sewage is released into the Derwent. It seems we've gone from ferrying the waste across the Derwent to dumping it in the Derwent, albeit treated a bit better. The fertiliser factory suffered a terrible explosion. The force was so great that people still find bones and other debris embedded in the hills near where the factory was. The factory also suffered a fire, and that was the end of it. The site has never been restored or developed. The need for a bridge was recorded as early as 1832. The shenanigans by the ferry operators was driving the government officials a bit crazy. By 1835 they started construction on the Bridgewater causeway. 200 convicts with shovels and wheelbarrows moved 2 million tonnes of rock and earth to form a land bridge about a mile long. It wasn't a dam, it didn't go all the way across the river. There was a narrow but deep section left for ships to pass through. A punt operated over the short distance to complete the road journey. That didn't last long before it too became another tedious ferry service. It was replaced in 1849 by a bridge that could swing out of the way to open for ships. In 1870 the railway went through and the causeway and bridge were widened to cope with trains. All went well until 1886 when a train derailed. Luckily no one was killed. By the end of World War II, a lifting bridge had been installed, and that remains today, although we've been promised a new bridge for years, setting the record for the number of times successive governments can re-announce the same project without ever having started it. There's a paper mill further upstream. The finished product used to be transported by barges to a wharf between Cornelian Bay and Government House. Those barges were low enough to pass under the Bridgewater Bridge. Other industry started along the banks of the Derwent. The fuel refinery, zinc works, and the chocolate factory to name a few. The ships that serviced those industries were larger, and so any bridge placed closer to Hobart had to accommodate them. This spot is not the narrowest part of the Derwent, so that's another challenge. The bridge would be quite long. By 1943 they figured it out, but they didn't build a steel bridge, a stone bridge, a wooden bridge, or even a brick bridge. In a state known for bridges and dams, a unique idea was born. The idea was so bold that they tested it in an artificial lake. An engineering hero called Alan Knight designed a bridge that could float on top of the water. He was Knight by name and later Knight by title, becoming Sir Alan Knight, although he was a knave to some, being the man who flooded Lake Pedder. The floating bridge was a marvel of engineering. It was designed in an arc shape with pins holding it together. This curved design gave it lots of strength. One of the pins still exists today, displayed at the location of the on-ramp. A remarkable piece of engineering, it was insured as a ship by Lloyd's of London. They called it the Hobart Bridge, but we know it as the Floating Bridge. It was a financial success. It paid for itself from the toll, but also it made some money from insurance claims when bad weather damaged this bridge that was also a ship. A more rugged solution was required. They did all the costs, and a tall bridge that ships could pass under was deemed a better idea. The concrete and steel Tasman Bridge cost £7 million, or about $200 million in today's money. There was only a short window of time when both bridges were up, so Pop's photo of the two bridges is quite special. The Tasman Bridge served very well until 1975, when it was hit by a ship called the Lake Illawarra, bound for the zinc works. Hobart was divided from the eastern shore again. The bridge had been designed to withstand a front-on hit by a ship to the large piers in the middle. They figured if a ship drifted off course and hit the bridge, the most likely place it was going to hit was right in the middle, and the front of the ship would probably hit first. So the pylon covers were shaped to deflect a blow and protect the bridge. But the Lake Illawarra was way off course. It struck one of the non-strengthened side piers, and it was trying to correct its course so the ship was side on when it struck. Everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. 2 of the segments fell down, and there were 12 deaths. 7 on the ship, and 5 in cars that plummeted about 60 metres before hitting the water. They never had a chance. Very quickly after the bridge was broken, they used the Risdon punt, and you could drive down to the zinc works and put your car on and go across. There must have been other ships that took cars, maybe the Bruny Island ferry. Passenger ferries were brought from Sydney, and very quickly a regular ferry service was established. This is credited as the making of Bob Clifford's International Catamarans Company. The Army was called in to construct a Bailey Bridge at Goodwood, across to Risdon Cove. That was a prefabricated steel bridge that came in pieces, and it was put together like a Meccano set. As it was designed for military vehicles including tanks, it was quite rugged, although it was important to space the load evenly on the bridge, and so there were markings every 2 car lengths across the bridge. You were only allowed to drive quite slowly, and this meant there was a bottleneck at either side of vehicles waiting to cross. They established marshalling yards, and you had to drive into a marshalling yard, park and wait your turn. The Bailey Bridge rattled and made a lot of noise as you went across. They repaired the Tasman Bridge and also added an extra lane, making it wider than it had been before, so the finished bridge was supposed to be better than the original. Steel cables were added to increase the strength of the bridge. These are tightened regularly, and that's what that gantry hanging under the bridge is for. The repairs on the Tasman Bridge cost $44 million, or about $250 million in today's money, making it more expensive than the original construction cost. The government decided that we could not be dependent on a single bridge ever again, and so when the Bailey Bridge was removed, a new bridge was built at the same site, and that was called the Bowen Bridge, after Lieutenant Bowen, who was the one that started the failed settlement at Risdon Cove in 1803. I did the black and white restoration of Pop's famous bridge photos a while ago, but I only recently got them hand-coloured. This shot is difficult today, but the drone gets me up above the trees, so we can see the bridge again. I think Jim had to climb a ladder when he rephotographed it for me. I wasn't ready to make this episode. I had all the photos selected, but I couldn't find the inspiration. Then I saw some night photos of the bridge on Instagram. I contacted the photographer, Mark Thompson, and discovered that he also makes videos. He's done one that's on SBS, and that's where I'd like to take Forgotten Tasmania one day, onto mainstream television. This darn bridge just keeps on connecting people. Right now it's connecting me to photographers, artists, engineers and historians. And I'm seeing the bridge from different angles and in different light. There's lots of threads linking Pop's work to these modern artists.
So I hope you've got a new appreciation for the ways that people have crossed this mighty river over the years. I'd encourage you to get out and really experience the bridge, have a look at it from different angles. You know, you can park really close to the bridge, or there's the Hobart cycleway that'll bring you right underneath it. Many ways that you can appreciate this amazing structure. Thank you for watching, catch you in the next one. Cheers.